unpack this one, shall we? This is one of those mysteries that just seems to claw its way back into the public eye every few years. The Zodiac Killer.
It's been, what, like over 50 years?
Over 50 years, and it still fascinates people.
Well, I think what's really fascinating about this particular case is how the killer essentially became this macabre celebrity.
Oh, totally. It's like he wanted to direct his own, twisted biopic or something.
Right. He wasn't content with just the crimes he craved, the spotlight. He was crafting an image.
And you gave me a ton of material on this one.
I did.
I can tell you were like elbow deep in old newspaper clippings and the latest theories.
It seems everyone has a theory on the Zodiac.
Right.
Which makes it really difficult to separate fact from fiction.
Exactly. And that's kind of our mission in this deep dive today. So to understand why this case still gets under our skin, you have to picture San Francisco in the late 60s.
Okay.
It's not just that there's a killer on the loose, it's how this guy made himself known. Cryptic letters, ciphers, taunting the police. This guy was practically begging for a front-page story.
And he got it. And that's maybe the most unsettling aspect of this whole thing.
Totally.
The more attention he got, the more he seemed to escalate.
So he wants the attention, but what's the end game here? This wasn't just random violence. There was a pattern here. It was a chilling one. He was targeting couples.
Right.
Particularly in lovers' lanes.
Yeah, and that's another detail about this case that has really captivated investigators and armchair detectives alike. Is there some motive there, like a vendetta against love or romance itself? It's a question that just hangs over this entire case.
Like a bad date that just won't go away.
There you go.
Speaking of which, we should probably talk about the confirmed victims. David Faraday and Betty Lou Jensen, just teenagers. They were on a date when they became the Zodiac's first victims.
December of 1968.
That's where it all begins.
And it just sent shockwaves through the Bay Area. But it's just the beginning. The Lover's Lane killings continued, and it just further fueled the public's fear and fascination with this case.
And then there were the survivors. Michael Magoo and Brian Hartnell, they lived to tell the tale, right? But even their accounts couldn't definitively unmask the man behind the terror.
Right, and you have to imagine the psychological toll that takes on these people, knowing that whoever attacked them was still out there potentially claiming more victims.
It's like something out of a horror movie.
Exactly.
Except it was terrifyingly real. And those survivors were some of the few who came face to face with the Zodiac and lived to tell about it. But, it wasn't just the attacks themselves, it's how he taunted everyone with those letters and ciphers. That's a huge part of the Zodiac's legacy, right?
Absolutely. And imagine being, a detective on this case, right? You get these horrific crime scenes, witnesses are terrified, and then you get a letter in the mail. Signed with this, this circle and cross symbol.
It's like he was trying to make sure everyone knew it was a game.
Exactly.
And that we were all just pawns in it.
A game that he was winning for a while, at least.
So he starts sending these rambling letters to newspapers in like 69, the Vallejo Times-Herald, the San Francisco Chronicle. And he's not just boasting. He's including details from the crimes.
Right.
Stuff that only the killer would know.
A way to exert control.
Right.
To prove his power over the police and the media.
Yeah.
He even claimed that he was collecting slaves for the afterlife.
Nah.
This bizarre detail, it just added another layer of creepiness to the whole thing.
And then on top of the letters, you've got the ciphers. I have to admit, those always kind of get me. This idea that, these seemingly random symbols could unlock the whole case.
Yeah.
It's like Sherlock Holmes, only way creepier.
And he knew the effect they'd have, right? That's the genius of it. Understanding the human need to solve puzzles, to find patterns, so you give them something to obsess over, knowing it could be the key to his identity, or just a complete wild goose chase.
Which, more often than not, they were right. So we've got 4 main ciphers attributed to the Zodiac. The 408 symbol one that was cracked relatively quickly.
Yeah, a school teacher and his wife cracked that one, which I imagine was a huge EE moment for everyone following the case. But here's the catch. Instead of a name, it was more of the Zodiac's usual bragging.
Of course.
This time, about his afterlife plans or whatever.
So a win for code breaking, but kind of a swing and a miss for anyone hoping for like a straight answer.
Right.
So fast forward to 2020, the 340 cipher gets cracked decades later. Did that one offer any more clues?
Not really. More taunts, more ramblings, but it did include the phrase gas chamber, which some experts believe hints at his mindset, like this complete lack of fear of being caught.
So 2 down, 2 to go. One of which, if the Zodiac is to be believed, actually reveals his name.
Yeah.
I mean, can you imagine? His name could be out there just waiting for the right, code breaker to come along.
It's a tantalizing thought, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it just speaks to the enduring mystery of this case, We're still chasing these answers just like investigators were back then.
And speaking of chasing answers, let's talk suspects. You've got, like, I don't even know how many files of these. Arthur Lee Allen. He's the one that seems to always pop up, right?
He does. And rightfully so in some ways, because he is the only Calais suspect that's been officially named by law enforcement
Really?
in this entire saga.
Wow.
Out of all the theories, out of all this speculation, he's the one they zeroed in on.
So what made him suspect number one?
Well, for one thing, he was a convicted sex offender. He had a history of violence, and there was some circumstantial evidence that placed him near a couple of the crime scenes. And then you've got these rumors swirling around that he had talked about wanting to kill people and call himself Zodiac before the murders even started.
Okay, that's more than a little creepy. But if he was so suspicious, why wasn't he ever charged?
That's the million-dollar question, really.
Yeah.
And it all goes back to evidence or the lack thereof. So his fingerprints didn't match those at the crime scenes. His handwriting didn't match the letters. And this DNA testing eventually ruled him out.
It seems like every time we get close to a lead in this case, it's like hitting a brick wall of, nope, not him.
Nope. Yep.
So Allen's officially cleared, but I feel like that hasn't stopped people from believing he was involved.
Not at all. And he's become almost this mythical figure in a way, especially after he was portrayed by John Carroll Lynch in David Fincher's movie Zodiac back in 2007.
Oh, yeah.
And it just goes to show how powerful a narrative can be, even if it's not officially confirmed.
Totally. So if not Allen, who? You mentioned a group called the Case Breakers. They seem pretty convinced they've cracked this thing with a guy named Gary Francis Post.
They are.
Yeah.
And their confidence has definitely, shaken things up in the true crime world.
So who are these guys?
So the Case Breakers are a team of former law enforcement investigators.
Okay.
And they've been pretty vocal about Post being their guy.
So what's their smoking gun? What evidence are they pinning this all on?
Well, they point to a few things. First, Post had scars on his forehead that they believe matched descriptions from one of the surviving victims.
Yeah.
Then there's this whole thing about how his full name can be used to decipher some of these Zodiac ciphers.
Whoa.
Which is wild if true. And finally, they say there's potential DNA evidence on a hiking mat that belonged to Post.
Okay, so we've got DNA evidence, case closed, right?
Not so fast. None of this has been officially confirmed by law enforcement.
Ah.
The FBI still considers the Zodiac case open, but they've been pretty silent about the Case Breakers' claim. So it's kind of like they're stuck between a rock and a hard place. Do they acknowledge this new information and risk, giving it more credence, or do they stay quiet and potentially miss out on like a real break in the case?
Yeah, it's a tough spot to be in for sure.
Yeah.
So are we back to square one again? More theories, more speculation, no real answers?
Well, not necessarily. The Case Breakers have another interesting claim. They believe that Post was also responsible for the murder of Cherry Joe Bates back in 1966.
Hold on, I know that name. Wasn't there some talk about the Bates murder being connected to the Zodiac way back when?
There was. A handwritten letter was sent to the police claiming responsibility for Bates's murder, and for a while there it was thought to be a Zodiac letter. But authorities are now saying that they've ruled out any connection.
Another dead end. Man, this is frustrating. Are there any other suspects in the mix? I mean, it can't just be Allen and Post, right?
Oh, there are plenty more. Each with their own set of, circumstantial evidence and passionate supporters. You've got Richard Gaikowski, a journalist who lived and worked near some of the crime scenes.
A journalist. Okay, that's a little on the nose even for the Zodiac.
Right.
What's the story there?
Well, he had some mental health struggles, which some people point to. And there was this one witness who thought she heard the attacker's name was Richard.
Okay.
And one of the victim's sisters even claimed that she saw Gaikowski at the funeral.
But was that enough to make him a serious suspect?
Not really. Again, more circumstantial stuff that makes you go, but not enough to definitively link him to the crimes.
So another one bites the dust. This case is full of them. What about some of those other theories that are out there? The ones that go way off the beaten path. The ones that almost make you wonder if people are messing with us at this point?
You mean like the theory that Ted Cruz is the Zodiac Killer?
I mean, come on.
But
I guess it goes to show how deeply this case is embedded in our collective imagination.
For sure.
People are so desperate for answers that they'll latch on to anything,
Right.
even if it sounds completely bonkers.
Well, and you got a case like this that's remained unsolved for so long. It's almost inevitable that these outlandish theories are going to pop up. People can't resist, filling in the blanks with their own interpretations.
Totally. But we have to remember, speculation is not evidence.
Exactly.
But even with all this talk about suspects and theories, we haven't really answered the big question. WHY hasn't this case been solved? Is it just bad luck? Is there something more to it?
It's probably a combination of factors. We keep running into this issue of incomplete or inconclusive evidence. Those partial DNA samples, the unreliable witness accounts, it all adds up.
It's like we've been trying to catch smoke this whole time.
Right.
You get close to what you think is a solid answer and it just kind of slips through your fingers. Why do you think we're still so obsessed with the Zodiac after all these years?
And I mean, unsolved mysteries have a way of getting under our skin, don't they? But the Zodiac case is more than just some unsolved puzzle. It taps into some, like, primal fear
Right.
that's out there.
This idea that someone could be so cunning and so brazen and
And he was good. He understood something about fear, about how to make himself into this legend. And the letters, the ciphers, it's like those weren't just the ramblings of a madman. They were calculated to keep people guessing,
Oh,
to
totally.
keep the myth of the Zodiac alive.
He weaponized the media
Yes.
and amplified his own infamy.
He did.
And it worked. Decades later, we're still sitting here talking about him, debating his motives, trying to decode these messages. He wanted to be remembered, and he succeeded on a level that I don't think anyone could have predicted.
And in a way, that's what I find so fascinating about it.
Right.
We're so used to true crime stories having a neat resolution. A culprit is caught. A motive is revealed. We don't get that satisfaction with the Zodiac case. It's messy. It's incomplete.
And that's what makes it so interesting.
Yes, it forces us to confront our own, desire for closure,
Right.
for answers. And when those answers are elusive, we start to fill in the blanks ourselves. And that's how you end up with so many theories, so many different interpretations of the same events.
Which, let's be honest, is part of the fun.
Of course.
Right. I mean, where's the harm in putting on your little detective hat and trying to connect the dots? But I think it's important to remember that there are real lives at the heart of this story. Victims and families and investigators who dedicated years of their lives trying to crack this case.
Absolutely. We can't lose sight of the human cost of the Zodiac's crimes. But at the same time, there's something about this case that transcends the specifics of the murders themselves. It becomes a reflection of our own anxieties, our own fascination with the dark side of human nature.
It's like we're looking into one of those funhouse mirrors. It's distorted, it's unsettling, but you can't look away.
That's a great way to put it.
And who knows? Maybe someday someone will find that missing piece of the puzzle. Maybe one of those remaining ciphers will finally reveal the truth. But until then, the Zodiac case remains this chilling reminder that some mysteries are just destined to stay unsolved,
And haunt us forever.
challenging us to make sense of something that might not make sense.
And that's maybe the most unsettling truth of all.
Well, we have definitely gone deep on this one.
We did.
Big thanks to you, our listeners, for joining us on this journey into the heart of darkness. We've dug into the facts, we've grappled with the theories, and we've tried to understand the enduring hold this case has on us. If you're as obsessed with this case as we are, hit that subscribe button to let us know what you think went down all those years ago. Until next time, keep those thinking caps on.